Thank you everyone for joining us this evening. We will just ask you to keep your microphones muted. That way we can expand our broadband and have a wonderful presentation. This evening, we have two individuals from Morning Sun that will very kindly present on the packet that they provide to families benefiting from these services. We have Cheryl Fenerstrom and we also have Erin Holdeen with us.
Hi, thank you for having us.
Hi.
Would you mind just introducing yourselves and just sharing a little bit about who you are and what you do before we get started?
Sure, absolutely. Cheryl, do you want to start?
Sure. My name is Cheryl Fenerstrom, and I'm the Chief Operating Officer for Morning Sun Financial Services. And we started working in Utah in 2006. And we started with a contract with DSPD. And so we've been there all these years. And we have a person who wasn't able to be here tonight who is in Utah, who is in Salt Lake City, and she will be one of the contacts that you'll work with for this program. But we're very excited to talk with you, and I think it's great that you have this opportunity. Being on the wait list, I know that often is a really long process, and it's great that the state has given you this chance to use these services during this time. So we're happy to be here.
Yeah, great. And I'm Erin Holdeen. I'm the Executive Administrator with Morning Sun. And I oversee both our HR department and our program department, or the person who works directly with the families receiving services. Her name is Seal Van Kampen, so you may also have contact with Seal. She works in Salt Lake, and I actually work out of our office located in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And so you'll likely be in contact with both Seal and I throughout the process to get everybody started. But we're excited to be one of the providers with this new service, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you guys have today as well. So thank you for having us.
Thank you so much, Erin and Cheryl. And we know that this process has been quick. It's been pretty swift the way it's been sort of put together, and we are incredibly grateful that this opportunity is available to our families. As short time as it is still quite invaluable help. And so we appreciate you getting us a step closer to being able to access those particular supports. So without further ado, I would just turn the time over to you to present on your end of the packet, and then we will proceed to a brief Q&A with the families.
That sounds great. So we actually have two packets that we'll go through today. The first is what we call our employer enrollment packet, and that is for the participant to be set up as their own employer. And after that is done, we'll review the employee packet, or what families need to, the paperwork that needs to be filled out to hire employees to work with the participant. So I believe Cheryl is going to go through the employer paperwork. So let me just share my screen here. And can everybody see that?
We can.
Okay,
Great.
perfect.
So I'm going to start going through the packet, and I'm going to have Erin jump in and help me if along the way a little bit. We'll kind of tag team with each other. But I think one of the things I want to tell you about this process is that you know, it looks a little overwhelming when you look at the forms, but what we've tried to do is make it as easy as possible by filling these. You know, we have these sample packets that you can use so you know what you need to enter and what you need to fill out, and we will help the folks at the Parent Center who are helping you. We will answer your questions directly, and we've hired additional staff so that we can really, on a temporary basis, so that we can be as efficient as possible so that you get the information you need and you get to use the funds that are that are provided for you. I'm seeing chats as we go along, and maybe I can just, I think I confused somebody already, so that's not good. Which packet is for me to get paid for taking care of my daughter? Okay, so the packet that we're going to go through first. So when you self-direct your services or self-administer, and there needs to be a person who's the employer. And Morning Sun is not the employer, we're the payroll agent. And we'll talk about that as we go through the packet, but the first thing, again, is to know that the participant typically is the person who is the employer. And if you are getting paid for taking care of your daughter, then you are the employee. And so the question, where do we get this paperwork? We will have paperwork on our website, and you also will can get paperwork from the Parent Center, the Utah Parent Center. Is that right, Esperanza?
So at this time, families that have applied for the short-term supports through DSPD are receiving approval letters. Those are being sent out every Friday. And as part of that, you will be receiving the packet directly from them. So the fiscal agent packet will make it to you as you receive approval after you've applied.
Right. So you probably have had this experience where people call the people who receive services by different names. Participant is the word that we use most often because, people, and you'll see that on some of our forms, we've said consumer, we know people served, clients. I mean, there's a lot of different things terms that people use, but we use participant as the most generic, I guess you would say, name, and the person who is the participant is most often the employer. And so we have these packets that we're going to show you. The ones you see they're entitled Autofill Fields, and what that does is it allows you to put in all your kind of relevant information: consumer name, employer name, address, and then this. If you do this on your computer, it'll auto-populate all the forms with this information, so you won't have to just repeatedly put in the information. If you do it on a paper packet, then you will have to repeat that information. The person on the waiting list is the employer. Yes, that is right. Okay. And somebody's asking me where. And yes, there will be a recording. I'm going to keep going through the packets, and maybe Erin, you can monitor the questions.
Yeah, or I was thinking maybe I don't know if it's helpful to go through the packets, and that might answer a lot of the questions that are being asked. And then if there are some questions that didn't get answered as the packet was being reviewed, then we can maybe touch on those at the end.
Yeah, that is a reasonable course of action. So go ahead with your presentation. If families have any questions, they're welcome to add it to the chat. If we know the answer, we'll answer them. If we don't, we will wait till the end of the presentation and then present questions to our Morning Sun guests.
Okay, that sounds great. And you see that on this autofill, you'll include your support coordinator. And this is just like the front page for the form. And then the next page that you'll see is the page that tells you it's like a checklist. And the purpose of it is to make sure that you get all the forms returned. And I just really want to emphasize that it's important, I think, we want you to know that it's important that we get all the information that are required for the packets. And again, if you call us on the phone, we can go through them with you. We can respond to the Parent Center and provide this information. But it will slow things down if we get packets that are incomplete. And we want this to go as efficiently as possible because we know that you have a limited time. So that's why we're going to be, that's why we're providing you with these samples ahead of time, and why we want to do this training with you, so that hopefully we get all the information that we need the first time. So
Just add one thing.
Yep.
If you don't mind, I'll just add this first page here. The purpose of this page is that if you fill out all of this information that's being asked, it will auto-populate through the packet. So you won't have to fill out the consumer or the participant's name on every page, or the employer's name, the address. It will automatically populate throughout the packet. So we did that so for the ease of the people completing the packet. Once you fill in this first page, a lot of the packet's going to be completed for you, and there won't be much more to complete. But we'll still go through the form so you understand what is being filled out when you complete this first page. So this is just a cover page here with your identifying information that will autofill the rest of the packet for you.
And again, so all these little red boxes, they're the boxes with the autofill. And so all this information, if you do it online like this, is going to come up filled in for you. And again, this page 2 is a checklist, so that you know exactly what needs, which of these forms need to come back to Morning Sun, which ones you'll need for your employees, and which ones are provided just as general information. And we'll just keep going through the forms. This is just our welcome letter. And one of the things that is important to know is that, again, you'll work with Seal primarily, and with Erin as well. But what's important to know is that we will tell you when your packets are all done and we've been able to register you as an employer, and we make sure that your employees, have filled out their packets properly. And we'll get back to you and say that you're good to go, or that all your paperwork has been approved. And it's really important that you wait for that indication from us, because if you start as an employee or have your employees start before that time, we won't be able to pay for it and bill for it. And it hinges on the fact that all this paperwork has to be complete in order for us to be eligible to bill the state for the wages. The next one, this is another enrollment form instructions that you can use. This is part of our packet that we use all the time. So we had already put some of the instructions together. So this first form, SS4, is the application for an employer identification number. And that is how you become an employer in the eyes of the IRS. And this has to accompany this packet. It's really the first step in becoming an employer. And so the employer's name and address, the county, and then the social security number of the employer goes in box 7B. Ultimately, this is submitted after you send it to us, and you'll sign it at the bottom. This is the first piece of paper that gets submitted to the IRS, and they will provide an employer identification number And just like an employer, Morning Sun has a employer identification number. Now you, if you're the employer or the participant, will have an employer identification number. The third party designee, that's our Kelsey Christensen. Those are Amber and Brooks. Those are our employees, and that's our address in Minnesota and our phone numbers. But those that information goes along with this form to the IRS.
So you'll want to make sure that the employers are signing the bottom of the form. Although we have the font of a signature here, that it actually does have to be a real signature. It can't be, although you can fill out the entire form electronically and type in your address and phone number, it does have to be a real signature that is on the actual forms. Okay, so they will have to be printed and sent back to Morning Sun. We can't have you just use any kind of font and type in your signature. Okay.
Right.
All right. So this is just page 2 of the form we were just reviewing. Okay.
So this next form, the 2678, is a form that you fill out or the employer fills out that appoints Morning Sun as your agent with the IRS. And that, you know, it's limited to this program, this employer number. It doesn't give us any greater powers with the IRS for any of your other business or any of your personal taxes or anything like that. It is limited to this employer name. You'll see on part 2, line 1, you won't fill that out because we need to apply for your employer identification number. But once we have that number, then it gets, it gets filled out on the form. And then this form too, you sign all this information, autofills, and then we've already checked these boxes. These are the things, Form 940 and Form 9041. These are the taxes that we're going to file on your behalf as the employer. And we've checked all those boxes, so all you again have to do, this also again requires a real signature, so you'll have to print it out, then you sign it. We've provided all the information, except you'll need to use, fill in your daytime phone number and the employer name and the employer signature. This next form, tax information authorization, again, we auto-populate it, but we filled in a lot of the information that you need to know about that's relevant to who we are. Again, this is a form that is specific to this program. It doesn't give us access to any information about you as a taxpayer. It doesn't give us access to any of your personal information. It gives us access to the information specific to this program and to this employer identification number.
Can I just interrupt you for a second there, Erin and Cheryl? There's a matter of confusion where people are going back and forth in the chat that I just wish to clarify. So there's 2 different services that you would need to set all of this paperwork up for. And one is if you're doing caregiver compensation, if you the caregiver are both the employer and the employee. The consumer is the person on the wait list. If these are self-administered services, that's the terminology that's used, meaning you are administering them to yourself. So as a caregiver, you're both in that situation. If you're doing respite, you're the employer and somebody else is going to be that employee that you're going to bring on board to provide those services. So I understand that that's a tad bit confusing, but I hope that's a bit more clear as we continue with the paperwork. Thanks.
Great, thank you. So to continue with this form, a lot of this is already going to be filled in for you because this is information that we pre-filled on your behalf. And then the employer, again, is just going to sign and date the bottom.
Right. This next form is for the Utah Department of Workforce Services, so it's the unemployment insurance. Again, we've done a lot of filling in of our Morning Sun information and address and phone numbers and our federal employer ID number. And you will just put in, you'll need to fill in the county where you reside, and then the employer name again, social security number, your home address, and enter the date. This 11A, there's a little red box there. The first Utah wages paid to employee, including corporate officers. And so that is your start date with the program. Correct me if I'm wrong, Erin.
It's actually going to be the first date that we pay your employees. And I know that often you may not know that information because you might not know the start date when you're filling out these forms. So if that's one that's left blank, we can fill that out for you because we'll know once the paperwork comes back when your services will begin and when we'll pay those employees. So if you happen to know because you're working with somebody who tells you services will start on September 1st or on October 1st, you can put that date in. If you aren't sure, you can just leave that blank and we'll fill it in on your behalf.
Okay.
So on all of these
as a reminder,
on all of these forms, the only sections that need to be filled out are going to be highlighted in red. Okay, everything else you can leave blank or we filled out on your behalf, so you don't need to fill any of that information out.
Okay.
So this, for example, you can leave this blank and then just add your signature and date on the second page. Go ahead, Cheryl, sorry.
Yep, okay. I was going to say that I wanted to make sure to say again that you want to make sure that you wait for us to tell you that all your paperwork's complete and it's good to go. And again, that's because all the employer information, including the employer identification number, these forms have to be filed with the IRS before you're actually ready to go and before we can bill the state for your services. So we'll tell you that many times because we'll tell you again tonight, and we'll tell you when we work with you because it's such a critical part of, it's a critical part of getting started, and we don't want people to start their employees when they're not eligible for payment. So this next form, we call it our work agreement, and it's an agreement between the employer and Morning Sun. And I call it the lawyer's form because it was created by a lawyer. And because really it's about defining our roles. And the fact is that in the eyes of the IRS, in the eyes of, as part of this program, we need to be clear about the role of the employer and the fact that Morning Sun is not the employer, we're the payroll agent. And so when we act on your behalf by depositing taxes and helping you with enrollment or whatever, we're still acting as an agent and not as the employer. And that's the nature of self-administered services. So there you go. Again, auto-filled, auto-populated. And again, if you don't have the ability to auto-populate, we will have these forms, these samples for you, and you'll be able to use them. Put them next to the blank forms and fill them out. If you ever have any questions about like this form, for example, it's important that you read through it and that but again, in the main, what it means is that you're the employer and there are certain duties that certain things we're responsible for as your agent, and we want those spelled out. Again, you sign your name, and you have to print that off so you can sign it so it has a signature. The next section is a E-Verify Memorandum of Understanding, and what that is we need to verify that the person who's the employee and is eligible to work, and we're asking you to sign this to give us permission to use your employer identification number to complete this process.
This form is, yeah, and so this is giving us authorization to do it electronically. This form is really long, so I'm just going to go through, I can just explain this first page. The rest are just instructions on what E-Verify is. So like Cheryl said before, a lot of this is going to be auto-populated for you, but you're just going to sign and date here. Other than that, oh, no, I'm sorry. Never mind. I thought the instructions were in here, but they're not. So go ahead.
Okay. There's a link that takes you to the instructions. Right. This next form it tells you about our expense summaries, and what we do is you will be given an allocation, and that allocation is the amount of money, the amount of funds that are available to you to spend for services. And as you have payroll charged against that allocation, we keep track of that and help keep track of that for you. So every month we'll send you a report that tells you this is how much money you started with, and this is how much you spent during the month, and this is how much you have left. And
yeah, and we actually will provide that to you in the number of hours that are available. So it might say, I'm making up this example, right? But you might have 100 hours for the period of September through December. And if you use 20 hours in September, then your report is going to show that you had 100 to start with, you've utilized 20, and there's 80 hours remaining. So it should hopefully be easy for you to follow. We send those out around the 15th of every month for all the services that were used the previous month. But if you needed that information prior to the 15th, then you can contact Morning Sun and we can look up that information and provide that to you.
Okay. So you can get this information through the mail. You can get it electronically through our website, and just so you know, when we send it by mail to Utah, it takes a few days. And but as Erin said, the information is available. So let's say you had wages all in the month of September. That information is available October 15th and thereafter. And again, whichever way you choose to get that information. We've included an employment application for you if you are hiring somebody and you want them to fill out. This is not a required form, and that's why we put it in the employer packet, not in the employee packet. You can use this to collect information from your employee, but you don't have to submit it to us, or it's really just something you can use if you want to.
Yeah, we understand that a lot of times through self-directed services that families are choosing to hire other family members or close friends or neighbors that they already trust and know. And so you are fine hiring them without an actual application. However, in some situations, someone might be placing an ad or hiring somebody that they don't know. And so we provide this employment application. If you choose to use it, you can, but it's not a requirement to get started. So if you choose to use it and you want to know this information about the employee you're hiring, you know, what their background is or what special skills they have or their training, you can certainly require that they fill this out. Their past job experience.
And, you know, one of the things that we can provide for you as the employer, if we're the employer, is we can provide, you know, if there's ever any questions about your role and about what you can do legally as an employer, you know, we have people that can answer those questions for you and coach you. And if you have somebody who, you know, and again, as Erin said, a lot of these relationships are more informal because they are family members or people that you know. But if you were to hire somebody that you didn't know, we can help coach you and help you provide, you know, some level of advice to you about what good employment practices are. This is a consent for the release of information. So we ask that you sign this form and fill out and sign this form so that we can exchange information with the Utah Department of Rehab Services. If there's anyone else that you want to include on this form that you want us to release information to, you just need to list that person on the form. And then, you know, we don't get funding and budget information. That's the kind of information we need. We don't need to have medical information or a lot of personal information. And again, we'll need your signature on this form. The payroll schedule, this is something we provide to you, and we also provide it as part of the employee packet. As you can see, we've got a payroll schedule that goes for the whole year, and you'll be starting in the middle, you know, you'll be starting after the beginning of July, but we tell you what the payroll period is. We tell you when the timesheets are due and what the pay date is. It's really important that you pay attention to the payroll schedule because you want to make sure that the employees are paid on time. And that's why we say time entry is due. We must receive these before midnight. And we provide, you can scan them to us, you can fax them to us, but we'll need them on time, and then we tell you what the pay date is. And typically it's about 4 days between the time, I'm not saying that right. 4 days after the end of the pay period is when we need the time entry, the pay sheets.
So our pay periods we pay twice a month. So the pay period always runs from the 1st to the 15th. So your employees will work the 1st to the 15th. That's going to be one timesheet. And then the second timesheet of the month is 4 hours worked from the 16th of the month until the last day of the month. And then we always pay on the 15th and the last day of the month. If the 15th or the last day falls on a weekend or falls on a holiday, then we'll always pay you the day before. We won't pay late, okay? So like Cheryl said, you want to make sure that you're paying attention to this column that's highlighted in yellow. That is the due date. We allow 4 days for you to submit your timesheet after the pay period ends. So for example, this pay period that will go from September 1st to September 15th is going to be due in our office by September 19th. And you can fax in your timesheet, you can email, you can send it by mail if you choose to do that. We have a lot of families, probably the majority of our families will take a picture of their timesheet and email it in. Then you'll get a confirmation right away from our payroll department that your timesheet's been received. That seems to be the most trustworthy way to get your timesheet to us because we hate for it to get lost in the mail or if there's a delay with the post office. So then you can see that same example for hours worked September 1st to the 15th is due in our office by the 19th. And then you're paid for those hours on September 30th, okay? This last column here that says off-cycle pay date, we understand that sometimes timesheets you might forget to submit a timesheet, or your employee doesn't give you the hours that they work, and so you can't submit the timesheet on their behalf, or something might happen and you just can't get it to us on time. We don't want you to have to wait until the next pay period to be paid. So any timesheet that is submitted to us late or not received by the due date, so for this example, not received by September 19th, we run what we call our off-cycle payroll, and we'll still pay you. It's just going to be paid a little bit late, because we want to make sure that everyone who submitted their timesheets on time, will guarantee to pay them on time. Anyone who submitted late will still get paid, but they'll get paid 2 days later. So we'll pay that on October 2nd. All right, so on to the next one. Oh, and then these are the timesheets.
Why don't you go ahead?
Oh, okay. So the timesheets hopefully are pretty easy to understand. You're going to fill in the participant or the consumer's name, whoever the employee is going to write their name here. We understand that you may not have a support coordinator, so you could leave this part blank, support coordinator and consumer ID. So you're just going to fill in the start date or the start time. So for example, if someone were to work, so let's say this is for the month of October. If someone worked on October 1st, they're going to write in this time they started their shift. So let's example of 12 p.m. They ended their shift at 5 p.m. The service code, I believe, for everybody is going to be SL1. And then you'll want to write a small explanation of what you did during your shift, or what the employee did during their shift. And then at the very end here is going to be the total hours. So for that example, we'd write 5 if they work from 12 to 5. We offer this other column in case you have an employee who maybe works from 12 to 5 right here, and then they take a break and they come back and they work from 7 to 10 at night. So there's an option to fill in additional hours on that same day. So we have, so this first timesheet is going to be the 1st of the month, going all the way down to the 15th of the month, okay? And then every timesheet has to have the signature of both the employee and the employer. So I know some people who are doing caregiver compensation are going to be both the employee and the employer, and so you can just sign both of those lines, okay? And on the bottom of every timesheet, it will give instructions on how to submit the timesheet. So like I said, you can mail it in, you can fax it, you can email it. If you have questions, you can give us a call. So that's on the bottom of every timesheet.
So just to will families have a PDF form to fill out as a timesheet to submit, or what does the format look like? We have somebody asking if they can do it on their computer, for example, versus a cell phone.
Yeah, absolutely. So we can provide you a document that you can type in, or you can have a PDF that you can print out and handwrite if you'd like, whatever option works for you. Well, we can provide both of those to you. And then this is just the second half of the month. So this is the exact same timesheet, but you'll see here the dates are the 16th to the 31st of the month. Okay, and then the same thing here, you're going to sign and date the bottom. And then this is just a sample of how to fill out the timesheet. You want to talk about this?
We call this the how much will I get paid? How much will my employees get paid worksheet? And this has for you, it's my understanding that with this service, all the employees will be paid at the maximum wage. And this is for the SL1 wage. So $17.23 is the employee wage. When we say the cost to you, that means the cost to the budget. That's a cost to your allocation. So what that includes is employer taxes. those aren't the taxes that are subtracted from an employee's wage. Those are the taxes that all employers pay for employees, and it includes Social Security tax, Medicare tax, unemployment tax, and workers' compensation. So the employee wage is $7.23. The cost to you, or the cost to the budget, is $19.88. If there's overtime, that cost to the budget is $25.87. Oh, I'm sorry. The overtime wage is $25.87, and the overtime cost to the budget is the $29.84. Yes, the employee, the $17.23 is the gross wage. So that then the employee's income taxes are subtracted from that, and we deposit both the employer taxes, which I described, are the taxes that we described above, and the withheld taxes from the employee's income we deposit as well. Again, if you have any questions, our phone number is there for you to call.
So that is the end of the employer packet. I know that often when we do these trainings or we start up new families, it seems really overwhelming to go through a whole bunch of IRS paperwork and to talk about budgets and funding and insurance, and it's overwhelming to wrap your head around. But I can assure you, with these forms, if I'm going to scroll all the way back up to the top here, by filling out this first page, most of the packet will be completed for you. And so all we really need to do is have everybody fill out this first section, and then you're just kind of reviewing the form to make sure that everything was typed correctly or you didn't make a mistake on this first page. There's just those few other questions that might have to be answered that would be highlighted in this red box. If that's blank, fill it in, and then just make sure you're signing and dating all of the forms. Do we have any questions on the employer packet? Otherwise, the next step we can go through is I'll review how to fill out an employee packet to become a paid employee.
There are some general questions that I think will impact both. Somebody asked, if someone is already set up with Morning Sun, do they need to do this all over again?
No, they don't. So that person is lucky, right? You've already done the work. So no, you won't have to. We'll need to know who those people are so we can code them correctly in our system. So if they're receiving another service through Morning Sun and they're going to also do the waitlist care respite, we'll just need to know who those people are so we can make sure we have them listed under both. But if you're already set up and have an EIN and working with Morning Sun, it should be a really easy, smooth transition for you.
Excellent. Two other general questions. Somebody asked if they had trouble filling out the fields. Could they print it, write in it, and scan it in and email it?
Yeah, absolutely. You don't have to type it in. That's just an option for you. If you'd prefer to print it and handwrite it, that's perfect.
And the last one is, if somebody has made a mistake in the process and they're submitting it electronically, if they catch the mistake, can they just email the mistake, or do they have to go through the packet all over again?
Well, that's a good question. It probably depends what form it is and what the mistake is. Some things we can correct for you. But a lot of the forms we may have to send back and have you correct, since they are IRS forms. We can't have any forms with whiteout on them or scribbles. And so I would say, as a general answer, we'd likely have to have you refill that particular form out again. But if it's something simple, if maybe a box just wasn't filled out, we could probably fill it out for you.
Okay, great. And then there was a question about tax forms. So come tax time, will they be receiving any particular forms and information about earnings?
Yeah, so Cheryl had talked about the employer taxes. So there's two different taxes. There's taxes that we pay on your behalf as the employer, and then there's the employee taxes. So at the end of the year, all paid employees are going to receive a W-4 no, yes, W-2, excuse me, W-2, based on how you filled out your W-4. So the W-4 will be a part of that employee packet. And depending on how you fill out and the number of exemptions you claim, that you'll receive the W-2 at the end of the year, and you'll file taxes just like you do with any other job. But there is nothing that you need to do for the employer taxes. That's what Morning Sun does on your behalf as your payroll agent. We'll file all the taxes for you to be set up as an employer and pay all of your employees. So there's nothing you need to do as an employer, but you will, if you're a paid employee, you will have to file taxes.
Thank you, Erin. Let's continue, and then we'll revisit some additional questions.
Okay, sounds great. Whoops, I apologize. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to go through is the employee packet, and let me just make this a little bit bigger. Okay. So the example that I'm going to go through here today is if you're set up as both the employer and the employee, okay? And if you are hiring a different employee to work for you, it'll be slightly different, but the forms themselves are the exact same. So we have this packet set up the same way as our employer packet, where most of the fields will auto-populate or auto-fill for you. And so once you've typed them in on one form, it's going to populate throughout the entire packet. So this is the first page, our cover sheet, that simply lists the forms that are going to be in the packet that need to be completed and returned to Morning Sun. And so you can look here, you're going to list who the employee is. So in this example, John Doe is the receiving caregiver compensation, so he's set up as both the employee and the employer, okay? Of course, if you're set up as the employer and you're hiring somebody else, these names are going to be different. But for this example, we did a caregiver compensation packet. So you're going to fill in who the employee is, who the employer is, and who the consumer is, okay? These are instructions. This next form is just instructions on how to fill out every form in the packet, which I'll review with you. Okay, so this first form is what we refer to as a change notice. And really what it is, it's all your identifying information. And so we've auto-checked this, that you're going to be a new employee through Morning Sun. And then you're just going to fill in the employee's information, so their name, date of birth, social security number, phone number, address. And then the employer information is going to be filled out in the second section. So like I said, in this example, with caregiver compensation, this is going to be the same person, both the employee and the employer. However, if you're hiring somebody different, of course, those are going to be different. Whoever the employee is going to fill out that first section, and then the employer is going to fill out the second section. We've already chose this for you, the waitlist care respite, so that you don't have to fill that out. Everybody is doing SL1 at the rate of $17.23. And so then all you'll do is sign and date the bottom. This next form is the W-4. So this is obviously for tax purposes. If you have not filled out a W-4 in 2020, you'll notice that the form is really different than any W-4 that that anybody has had in the past. In previous years, we would fill out the number of exemptions that we're claiming on our W-4, and that is now changed, where you're actually filling out a dollar amount rather than claiming a number of exemptions. So this is the one form that we can't give you advice on how to fill out. So I can tell you how to fill out, obviously, section 1, which is just your identifying information, as far as your first and last name, social security number, address. This will all be auto-populated for you. But the one piece that won't be is this step 1C here, where we need you to check if you're single or married, filing separately, married, filing jointly, and if you're head of household. So just make sure you don't miss that step C, okay? Step 2, 3, and 4, they don't have to be completed, so you can leave this blank. Otherwise, you'll just follow or you'll just answer the questions that are being asked if you want to claim the exemptions. And then you're going to sign and date step 5. So really what we're looking for is that step 1 and step 5 are completed. If you'd like to claim exemptions, then you're going to be completing step 2, 3, and 4. So these are more instructions on how to fill out the W-4. And these are further instructions, and then a tax table regarding the W-4. Okay, this next form is our Employment Tax Questionnaire. And what this form is this is telling Morning Sun what your relationship is to the employer, so we know how to tax you. There are some tax exemptions for people who are the parent of the employer or the spouse of the employer, which may or may not apply to the people in this program. So we just need everybody to answer the questions that are being asked on this form so we know how to tax you correctly. So this is going to be auto-populated for you, the name of the employee and employer. And then you're going to check what your relationship is to the employer. So for anyone who's doing caregiver compensation, they're going to have this box checked. Check here if you are the employer listed above. If you're hiring somebody else to work for you, most likely they're going to be checking the second to last box that says I have no relationship to the employer. Okay. Otherwise, if the employee is a parent or a spouse of the employer, then we'll want to make sure that they check that appropriately. It then asks, state your relationship to the consumer and state your relationship to the employer. Okay, so in this situation of the person who is doing the caregiver compensation, they are the father of the consumer and they themselves hold the employer identification number. Then you're going to initial and sign and date the bottom. The next form is our direct deposit form. So we offer 3 payment options through Morning Sun. You can receive a check in the mail, a paper check in the mail. You can choose to have your paychecks direct deposited into your account. Or we offer what we call a pay card, and it's a Visa card that we would provide to you, and then the funds are located or are deposited, loaded directly onto that Visa card. So you can choose that option as well. And that's often a really good option for people who don't have a bank account. So, or someone who just wants to have it loaded that way, that's fine too. So again, a lot of this is going to be auto-populated for you. We can email you a copy of your earnings statement or a copy of your pay stub. And so if you'd like it emailed to you, you can click yes. Otherwise, we'll send you a paper copy in the mail. And then this is if you would like direct deposit, then you're going to put in your direct deposit information and attach a copy of a voided check or a copy of a statement from your bank that has both your routing and your account number. We know a lot of people don't have checks anymore, so that statement from your bank with both the routing and the account number will suffice if you don't have a check. If you'd prefer to have the pay card here, then you're going to click this option that says that you choose to have your funds deposited onto a pay card, and then we'll send that pay card to you in the mail. And then the last option is if you would choose a paper check. And then again, you're going to sign a date. All right, this next form is an I-9. So this is just authorizing or us verifying that you're authorized to work in the United States. So the employee is going to be filling out section 1. So if you're going to fill out all of section 1 here is going to be your identifying information that will autofill for you. Check if you're a citizen of the United States or whatever is applicable. And then sign and date at the bottom. So the employee is going to fill section 1. And then the employer is going to be filling out section 2 on page number 2. So in this example, again, this is a caregiver compensation where it's the same person. being both the employee and the employer. But if you are hiring another employee to work for you, make sure they're filling out section 1 and you're filling out section 2. So the purpose of this document is for the employer to review or look at identifying information on the employee to make sure that they are valid, that they are showing you valid ID. So a valid driver's license, a valid social security card, a passport, a birth certificate. Those are the most common 4 that we see. But if I scroll down, I'm going to come back to this page in a second. If I scroll down to the next page, it does tell you additional documents that can be used, additional identifying documents. If an employee has something from list A, so like I said, a passport is probably the most common that we see, but there are these other options that they could choose from. If they have something from list A, that's the only document that they need to provide, okay? If they don't have anything in list A, then they need to provide identifying information from both list B and list C. So they have to have 2 forms of ID if they don't have something from list A. So what the most common forms of IDs that we see with this form is going to be a driver's license from list B and a social security card from list C. Okay, but you can see there are other documents, the school ID card, voter registration card, birth certificate would work as well. Okay, so what the employer is going to do, I'm going to go back up to this second page. The employer is going to be reviewing those documents to make sure that they're real, valid documents, and they're going to be writing down the information that they saw. So list B, the person's driver's license information, and their social security card information. And then you're going to make sure that you make a copy. So you can either take a picture with your smartphone, or you can make a photocopy of the 2 forms of ID and send them in with this form. And then you're going to be signing here as the employer, saying that you reviewed the documents that you had listed up above. Okay. The most common error that we see on this form is simply that the employer forgets to sign this section here. So you can see that all of this is going to be auto-populated for you, except for the signature piece. So just make sure that you are signing page number 2. And then this is one form where we aren't allowed to accept if there's any whiteout or any scribbles on the form. So if you make a mistake, just fill out a new form. Don't use whiteout, or don't mark an X through it or write over it. Okay.
One quick question on the signature. Somebody asked, are digital signatures allowed there or not?
So that's a really good question, and I just want to make sure I say this correctly so everyone understands. If it's a real digital signature, that can be accepted. What can't be accepted is somebody simply typing in their name. So like choosing a cursive font or just typing their name in that section. But if it's a true digital signature, like they're using a stylus pen, or they have I know there are some apps now that will do a digital signature or save your personal signature, but that's digital. That's okay to, kind of plop it into that box as long as it's an actual signature. We just can't type in a signature. Does that make sense?
It does, as long as it looks like the actual signature, not necessarily a different version of that signature.
Yeah, but like I couldn't just type my name in here like in Times New Roman. I can't just type Erin Haldine. It has to be an actual signature. So if I have a format on my phone or my iPad or computer that allows me to sign with your mouse or sign with a stylus pen, you can certainly do that. Okay, that's a good question. This next form is our overtime agreement. So this is just explaining to the employee and the employer that any hours that are worked above 40 hours in a week are paid at time and a half. That's a requirement. And so this is just stating that you understand that if your employees work more than 40 hours a week, we're going to pay them at a higher rate of pay, which of course then utilizes your budget much faster. So just something to be aware of. If if that's approved, if that's something that you need your employees to work overtime, that we would have to pay them by law a time and a half. This next form isn't a form that you need to fill out, this Notice 797, but this is regarding earned income credit, and it's something that some employees may qualify for. So what we encourage people to do is just look to see if they qualify for the earned income credit, and that's something then that you would talk to a tax professional about if you do. But this is just an informational form, that nothing that needs to be completed and returned to Morning Sun. And then these are just additional copies of the timesheets that we have already gone through. And another, this is additional copy. Actually, you know what? I apologize. This mileage form, we actually don't need. Mileage won't be approved through this program, so I'll remove that form. We can ignore that one. And I think that is it. Great. So do you want me to go back and review any of the parts of the packets that we had gone through? Are there specific forms that you want me to go through a little slower or repeat the information either on the employee or the employer packet?
So we have some questions.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Not sure who was speaking. We definitely have some additional questions that we should answer at this point. One of them was, if somebody has already set up an employee through Morning Sun in the past, do they need to fill out the employee form again?
Okay, that's a great question. So if they're working for the same employer, then they don't need to fill out a new packet. So if it's the same family or the same person that they're working with, then they can just continue to be paid as they are right now. If they're working for a new family or a new employer, then they do have to fill out a new packet, because the employee packet, we connect that to the employer. That I-9 form in particular has to be signed by the correct employer. And so we want to make sure that we have all the appropriate paperwork. So again, if you're working with Morning Sun and you're going to continue working with the same employer, then there's no additional paperwork that needs to be completed. But if it is a different employer, then you will have to complete the packet again.
Erin, I'm going to add this question to this, and that is, if somebody was an employee and they haven't worked for a while, what is the time period that has?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Right.
Yeah, that's a good question. So typically we will allow someone to remain active with Morning Sun for up to 1 year. After a 1 year mark, we inactivate them in our system. There are some forms that we could go back and just accept, the old form that was submitted, but there are some forms that we would have the person redo, because we want to make sure all their information is still current. Another piece of this, which I didn't go through today, is to answer Cheryl's question, is if you're for the people who are doing caregiver compensation, my understanding from DSPD is that they do not have to have a background study done. Okay. However, all other employees do have to have the background screening completed. And so I didn't review that form today, but that's an additional form. It's pretty self-explanatory in the packet. And so they're going to be filling out a background screening form to have that completed if they're a non-parent or non-guardian working. So to answer Cheryl's question, that would be another piece that we would be looking at. If they are a non-parent who's required to have that background screening, do they have an active background screening on file with Morning Sun? And if they do, then we likely could work with you to get the services started pretty quickly. But if they don't have an active background screening, then we would have to wait for that to clear first.
Thank you. We had another question where a few people were concerned about some language that said, check here if you are the employer. And in addition to that, it says you are unable to be paid as an employee under the payroll model. And
yes,
they were wondering if that was an error, if that's going to be disregarded, or what it meant.
It will be disregarded. Thank you for saying that. So up until this time during the COVID pandemic, parents have not been allowed to work in Utah. So traditionally, parents cannot be both the employer and the employee. So we've always had that statement in our packets to notify people if they are making that mistake. However, during this COVID time, an exception's been made in the state of Utah where we have this caregiver compensation, where we're allowing employers and employee to be that same person. So I apologize. I understand that certainly would be confusing to see. And so we can have that sentence removed from that statement because it is going to be allowed from now through the end of December. Yeah, thank you for asking that question.
Thank you so much, Erin. We had a particular question here about names, so I'll just read it out loud. I'm divorced. My decree got left behind when I moved. My name is, and it's the last name on everything except my Social Security card. My Social Security card still has my married name. And so the question is, in terms of the forms, I'm scrolling down to the question, which name should the person use? And a bit of a follow-up to that, sorry, just more information. Both forms of ID, do both forms of ID have to have the same last name? Do I have to submit my Social Security card?
Yeah, so you do have to submit your Social Security card, and that is how we would have you in our system. And that's what the form, or that's the name that needs to be, I'm sorry, that's the name on your Social Security card is a name that needs to be listed on the I-9 document. And so until your Social Security card is changed, we'll have everything set up under your old last name.
Thank you. And what is the 2014-7 form? Does that exemption apply for this caregiver compensation?
It does not. Actually, you know, what I'll do is I'm going to email DSPD an updated packet to have that removed. I realized that when I sent them probably had it in it. So the 2014-7 doesn't apply to this program. I received that clarification from Jamie Douglas at DSPD, and so we can have that form removed. So that can just be ignored for now.
I'm scrolling to see if we missed any questions that we should ask at this point. I would invite my fellow Utah Parent Center consultants to unmute themselves and ask if there's something I've missed.
I had a question that has to do with the taxes because of, like, they're trying to push through this tax exemption where we're not paying so much in the Social Security and all that. Is that going to affect this?
So I think you're probably referring to that form, that 2014-7 form. And
I just know my husband's gotten a break on our taxes because of whatever they're doing.
Okay,
Sure.
I think I know what you're talking about. I think that there is, recently was an executive order
Yes.
signed by President Trump that allowed not a forgiveness in Social Security taxes, but a delay in defer, exactly. That does not apply to this program because you won't be working during the time period that you would be paying it back. So the deferment is from September 1st to the end of the year, and the payback starts on January 1st, 2021 and goes to the end of April 2021.
Okay.
Thank you, Cheryl.
Okay. One more question. Do we have to wait for the background check to come through before we can use an employee?
That's a really good question. So the background screenings right now, the way the process works, so anyone who's doing caregiver compensation does not need to have a background screening done. If you're hiring another employee to work, they're going to fill out the background screening application and submit that with the employee enrollment packet that we viewed. So then the next step is that Morning Sun then uses Utah's background screening electronic system to enter you into the background to have your background screening completed. And that system then generates what's called a fingerprint form. And then we send the employee the form to have their fingerprints completed. So then once they receive the form, they will go to a location, and we provide locations to you, but they'll go to a location to have their fingerprints completed. Once those fingerprints are completed, that's when an employee can begin working. And so we'll notify you once those fingerprints have been completed, and the employee can work. And then the Utah Office of Licensing, who processes the background studies, depending on what's in the employee's background, I suppose, then they will review the employee's history and then tell Morning Sun if the person cleared or passed their background screening, or if they did not clear their background screening and they have to stop working. And so an employee can work for up to 30 days while we're waiting for that background screening to clear. If we don't have clearance within 30 days, then the employee does have to stop working. Or if we, of course, receive something that says they didn't pass their background screening, then we would have the employee stop working. So most people clear their background screening within the 30 days and they just continue working as normal. But to answer your initial question, you do have to wait until we receive those fingerprint forms back, and then we provide what's called a good to go, or we notify the employer that their employee is ready or they're good to start working.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Rochelle, did you have another question you wanted to
Yes,
ask?
I do. Is it required that when you copy your Social Security card and your driver's license that you need to copy both sides? That was one question that was asked.
Yeah, that's a good question. So it depends how your Social Security card is set up. Sometimes the Social Security card has your signature on the front side, and if that's the case, then that's the only side we need. If you have a different Social Security card that requires you to sign on the back, then we would need to see the back side as well. So it's wherever the number is and then the signature we need to see.
Any other questions?
Esperanza, I just wanted to clarify that you send in the background check without the fingerprint form?
Yes, so the fingerprint form won't be generated until we enter your background screening into the new Office of Licensing electronic site, and that generates a fingerprint authorization form that we then send to the employee. So if you've been hired or you've worked with somebody in the past who have utilized these services, you would have received a fingerprint form and a background screening form at the same time. The Office of Licensing changed their process, I believe it was last July. And so the process is now, it's a completely different process that we have to do, but we enter in your application, which generates an authorization form to get your fingerprints completed. And then the employee will take that to one of the fingerprinting locations to be fingerprinted.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So double checking on the W-4 form, I'm signing my name, but I don't have an employer EIN number. Do I just leave that blank and you guys, I'm doing the caregiver compensation, you guys will write that in since I don't have it yet?
On the W-4?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. Mm-hmm.
And the first date of employment, leave that blank too, correct?
Right.
Yes.
And this is Colleen. I see this question a couple times and just want to confirm that if you are doing caregiver compensation, yes, you are the employee and the employer.
Yes,
Yep.
that's correct. Yes.
Okay, a couple more questions came in. So my former married name is on my Social Security card, but my driver's license has my maiden name. Is that going to be a problem?
It shouldn't, because what we'll be looking at is the Social Security card.
Okay. And can I take a picture of the voided check, or do you need a physical one?
Oh, you can take a picture.
Great. Any other questions?
I'm probably a little bit unusual, but I'm actually a veteran. That technically can be used instead of my social, but you still need my social, right? So I should just use my social card?
You know what, that's a good question that I'd probably have to research a little bit to answer confidently. If you have a social security card, you know, just to answer it now, I would say go ahead and submit that to us. But if you do only want to use that, I can do a little bit of research and get back in touch with you if you'd like.
Okay.
Esperanza. This is
Yes.
Christine. I just wanted to go over a couple of points that were asked before. So one of them will, how will it affect your income? I know that question was kind of asked regarding the deferment, but I just wanted to make sure that, yes, if you're doing caregiver compensation and the money that you are earning, that will go on your taxes. So it could make your tax base a little higher. Or if you're receiving Social Security benefits or Medicaid, that could affect your Social Security. Medicaid has made a rule that they are not going to close any accounts during the pandemic due to income. So you should be okay with Medicaid, but it will affect Social Security and your taxes. So I just want everyone to be aware of that. And then the other question is where you can hire qualified employees or where. I just wanted to give my 2 cents on that one because I've been hiring respite myself for my daughter for about 10 years now. And there's a couple things that you can do. So you can, and they went over this a little bit too. You can post an ad on Craigslist. You can on KSL Classifieds. You can even post a job opportunity to some universities. You can call the university and say, you know, where can I post job opportunities for students? You can do it that way. You can reach out to your local faith groups. You could reach out to paras that have worked with paraprofessionals from the school or aides in the school that had worked with your child previously. There are a few ideas that you can. Also, care.com is a website that you'd have to sign up and pay for it, but you can post jobs there as well. So if you have further questions about that, you can always reach us at the Utah Parent Center and we can talk more about that.
Thank you, Christine. Any other thoughts or questions from the audience?
Well, I'll just add, you know, to kind of summarize, and I know I've said this before, so I'm being a little bit of a broken record, but you know, the packets look overwhelming. It's a lot to go through within, you know, an hour and a half, but trust the process and knowing that if you kind of pre-fill out those certain sections, that it will autofill for you. And then at that point, it's just reviewing the information to make sure that it's correct. If at any point along the way you want help, you can call us. We have, like Cheryl mentioned before, we've hired on some additional HR staff to help get everybody started as quickly as possible. Seal, our Utah representative, and myself, we have a great team of people who have worked for our organization for a number of years and really know these forms well. And so we're happy to walk you through them over the phone or answer any questions that you might have if you're filling out forms or if you just want to know how this is going to affect anything that, you know, any services that you're using. And, you know, hopefully we can get everyone started as quickly as possible so you guys can utilize this money through the end of December.
And I saw a question come through asking where the forms get submitted, and that information is on the face sheet.
Yes, so on the cover sheet of both of the forms, both of the packets. Yep, it'll tell you where to submit.
You can fax, and yeah.
Great. Well, that was incredibly helpful information. We can't thank you enough for joining us and presenting on the paperwork. Cheryl and Aaron, we really thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank
Okay,
you.
well, nice. Thank you so much for having us, and we look forward to working with you and working with this program. We're really happy that people have this opportunity.
Thank you. At this time, we'll go over the DSPD paperwork. Cheryl and Aaron, you're welcome to stick around if you want to. Of course, you're welcome to hop off the meeting as well. So for those families that want to listen to our breakdown of the DSPD paperwork, you're welcome to stay on.
Okay, thank you, everybody.
Esperanza, can I ask one more question?
Thank you.
Oh,
Sure.
yes.
Sure.
Can I clarify one more thing? Sorry, this is Christine again. So I had a parent ask me so we were told, and Esperanza, you can clarify this as well. We were told that employees would not be able to work over 40 hours. Is that still the case, Esperanza?
It is not the case. They are able to do overtime as long as they know the impact on their budget. That's really the key piece. So obviously, if families are working overtime, they're going to go through the budget quite quickly. So it depends on the pace as well they want to take.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And then, so if we have a person who is doing a caregiver compensation and they also work for another family doing respite through DSPD, so that is fine because they can go over the 40 hours, correct?
And
Yes.
they're separate employers also. They'll be working for separate employers.
Okay, so if it is separate employers, it wouldn't matter.
Right. It's like working for Burger King and McDonald's.
Awesome. Okay. All right. And I think that is the only question. So thank you.
Thank you, Christine. That's really appreciated. Okay, so at this time, I'm uploading a PDF file that's a sample DSPD caregiver compensation packet for the DSPD paperwork through DSPD. Let me just share my screen and we can go through those forms. In hopefully the next 15 to 20 minutes, we do have another presentation at 7, but we will try to help and walk you through it as much as we can. Okay, so at this point, you should be able to see my screen titled Caregiver Compensation Authorization. So this form is called the C-19, and this one is absolutely needed for caregiver compensation. As you can see, these have been pre-filled out to let you know what is expected in those fields. So right here, for person, it would be the person on the wait list. The PID, this is something that DSPD will fill out. It's not something you need to have to get through this form. Over here, you would have your name as the caregiver or the parent or guardian. This right here, DSPD will fill in, so you don't have to worry about it. Here are these check boxes. On the bottom, here's the signature of the caregiver. This is the signature that will come from DSPD. And by the way, anyone from the Utah Parent Center that wants to have some input on this as I go through it, if I miss anything or I'm sharing something wrong, please pipe in. Okay, this is the 29SA. This is the employer service agreement. So for this, the first thing I'll say is that initials are going to be required in every single one of the pages associated with this agreement. The person receiving the services, that is your person on the wait list. Address and phone number, contact information. Again, for the PID, this right here, DSPD will take care of this. That's not something you need to do. Here goes the signature of the caregiver. That's the person's representative. Signature of the caregiver. Name. On to page 2, right here for number 2. That is the person on the waitlist's name. And I see the chat being active, so I'll rely on the Parent Center consultants to reply to the chat. And if I'm going fast, or if there's something that needs to be asked, please go ahead and ask out loud.
Ashley, on page 1 and 2, yes, you will be checking all 6 of those boxes as true statements.
Thank you, Colleen.
And yeah, and Julia is reminding everyone that they do need to initial the bottom corner of every single page, just as a reminder.
Yep. For number 4, that amount is $7,500. The hourly wage is $14.12. And you would leave it here under RP1, so don't fill out anything else in this one. Again, here's that initial at the bottom of the page. We're still continuing with page 3 of the employer service agreement. Here you would write in your fiscal agent's name, which if you're in this presentation would probably be Morning Sun. And it has been assigned to you, of course, through your approval letter. You would know who your fiscal agent is. Here's that corner again with the initials.
You will want to read through this. It's just saying that you're not going to break federal laws. You're not going to take advantage of your kid. You're going to use, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. Reasonable expectations of the individuals entering into this kind of agreement. From here, again, there's that initial spot. Just information, additional information you should be aware of. If at some point you feel like you have questions as to what any of this means, please reach out to us at the Utah Parent Center. You're also welcome to call DSPD and get clarification on the language if you desire. There's that initial again, so don't forget those initials in the corner, bottom right-hand corner of the paperwork. Page 6, more language. Initials here. Page 7, more language. Initials here. And of course, your signature is going to mean that you've read through this, that you understand it. So any questions on the language, please reach out so that you understand. So for page 8, we need the caregiver signature right here, the caregiver's name. This will be done by a DSPD representative, so you don't have to worry about this section here. This is not applicable. Again, those initials, bottom right-hand corner.
Before you move on, Esperanza, can I just, this was kind of a confusing thing for a mom I was with today. That 8-page form is for the caregiver that is going to be the employer.
That is
So
correct.
that is your employer agreement. Only one caregiver needs to be the employer.
That is correct. Thank you for adding that, Colleen. That's very helpful.
The next form is the employee agreement. Both parents, as well as any other employees, will need to fill out this 4-page agreement.
And you'll start to see employee
Correct.
pop up in this section here, these 4 pages. So if you're hiring somebody, that would be that other person's name. If this is yourself or caregiver compensation, you're the employee as well. So just go ahead and fill it out with the contact information, social security number. Over here, that is the person on the wait list. That's the person receiving services. Here is that 1412 rate again for RP1 respite care. That is the wage. Initial, bottom right-hand corner. Again, language, an agreement that the employee is going to comply with the rules and expected behavior. Here, mark yes or no depending on whether the employee has a driver's license. For P, workers' compensation insurance is provided. So go ahead and click is. You are not doing this, but the fiscal agent is taking care of this part. So it will be provided. It is being provided. So mark is. Initials, bottom right-hand corner. More language. The employee signature, so your future employee that's going to be providing services, or your own if you're receiving caregiver compensation. If they are 16, 17 years old, somebody you're hiring, sometimes a sibling will do this kind of work. As the parent of that sibling, you're going to have to sign here, but if it's an adult, of course, nothing gets filled out here. You are the employer, so you, the caregiver, would be signing here and dating here. Your initials as the employee initials. I should have caught that earlier. So on the employee forms, those are initialed by the employee. The employer form, the employer agreement, that's initialed by the employer. So just pay attention on the bottom language here. We're getting close to the end of this packet. Here you would have the employee. This is their name, their contact information. Here is the person on the wait list name. Now, all of these mean that the employee is aware of this information. So the employer agreement were those previous 8 pages before the 4 pages for the employee, that they know what that is. So they would date here that they have knowledge of it, that they know where the information is, that they can go back and review it if they need to. That's what this means right here. The Department of Human Services Provider Code of Conduct. If somebody could post on the chat a link to where those are found. Same with the Division of Services for People with Disabilities Code of Conduct. If you could provide a link.
It's in the chat, Esperanza.
Perfect, thank you. Then just making sure that you are sharing that information with employees, or if you are doing caregiver compensation, that you are aware. what these are, that you review them, and that you date when those have been reviewed and when that information is basically received. Emergency contact information, that would be if something were to happen for the person on the wait list, where's the emergency contact information that has been received by the employee. Person support book, if somebody could add a link to that. Service specific training, the caregiver, the employer decides what is needed for the person on the wait list. Any additional information, perhaps any information about nutrition or about medication, whatever the person needs to know, that is something that needs to be shared with anybody providing respite. So here you would say, you know what that information is, and you've shared that with the employee, and the employee is saying, yes, indeed, I have this information and know this information. The process for reporting an incident, and also if there is behavior management information for somebody receiving the services, that is something that has been shared and is available to the employee. The employee would be saying that, yes, they have that. And know
Esperanza, excuse me, incident management or incident reporting is found in section I of the employer agreement, and it spells out all the times that you need to report something that happens while the individual is in the care of an employee.
Excellent information. Thank you, Lisa. So section I of the person's support book. This is for the employee to sign that they understand and will comply with those requirements. Certifying that the employee is able to provide appropriate services to the person. So that would be signed here, dated here. This is you, the caregiver. So I, the caregiver, representing the person that is receiving the services. You would sign here and date here. And this certification, this whole piece on the bottom here, would be completed by DSPD. Here's a code of conduct. Again, certifying, saying that you're aware of this, that your employee is aware of this. So the employee signs here, dates here, prints their name. The employer signs here, dates here, prints their name. Nothing will happen here through the facility. Information for the person on the wait list, name, date. The caregiver, who is the person's legal representative for the purposes of this form. You won't have the information for the support coordinator quite yet till you fill this out, so you don't have to worry about this. And that brings us to the end of the form. Okay, I will open it up to any questions if anybody wants to revisit anything that we went through. Now is your time to ask. We have another 5 to 10 minutes at most.
On that first page, the Form C19, the very first page that we went over, I believe that it was an error that it's PA1. It's RP1, correct? As far as the service code, PA1 isn't going to be used. Under identifying information on the very first page, where it says identifying information, there's person, and then caregiver providing SL1 or RP1. Is that right?
So, Rochelle, can you see my first page on the screen?
Mm-hmm.
Are you referring to this here?
Yes.
So over here, what families need to fill out is just their name.
I just didn't want there to be any confusion with those two codes, because the only two codes that we need to worry about is the respite one and then the supported living one, correct?
Yes, that is correct. Any other questions?
On these forms, I know with the tax ones, we had to physically sign it and turn it in. Can we do a digital signature, or does this have to be a physical signature as well?
That's a great question. To be honest, I would have to go on a hunch here, and it would probably be similar to what was shared by Morning Sun, where it's got to be your signature. I don't know that you'd be able to just, you know, type in a name and put it in a different font where that's not your actual signature, but it's worth checking out. That's my feeling on this. I don't know if
Thank you.
anybody from the Parent Center has had that question or has a different answer for that. Sounds like they haven't. Anybody else?
I have a question for the caregiver compensation. Is there certain stuff you can bill and stuff you can't bill where we're 24/7 with the kid, or how does that work?
So,
do we want to post that, what was it? Oh my gosh. Now I can't
the
remember.
link to the caregiver compensation guidance. Yes, that would be helpful. There is additional information and guidance for caregiver compensation, the rules basically. So we are sharing that now.
Okay. And it does talk about that PA1 service actually, and it's just the personal assistance. So some of it does apply.
Any other questions, whether they be about the forms or just generally?
I do have a question. Okay, so on the form that we filled out with Morningstar on, or Morning Sun Financial Services page, it said the rate information service code SL1 and it's 1723, and then you just had us put in respite care 1412 on page 1 of 4.
Correct. I also caught that as well. This pre-filled out sample form comes directly from DSPD. So my understanding is the respite rate is $14.12. I haven't heard the $17 rate till our training today. So
Okay.
I don't know.
Do we change that on that, or do we just leave it and they'll catch that for us?
I would definitely recommend keeping it, as DSPD has it on their form, and we'll wait and see if we'll ask on our end from the Utah Parent Center as well. But I think they would catch it if they realized, oh, that's not the right rate. They're not going to give you a different rate from the rate they're planning on, basically.
So it's okay.
Esperanza? Sorry, this is Lisa from the Parent Center. My understanding when we were getting trained from DSPD is that those amounts could be filled in when you get your support coordinator, because respite and supported living are basically the two codes being used. So those don't need to be filled out, but she just put those in there as an example, is how I understood it.
You know what, Lisa? I believe that rings a bell for me. Let's act on that. So yes, I do believe you're going to be able to have another conversation with your support coordinator once you receive your support coordinator about your plan and how everything plays out in the end.
So it's okay to submit these with some blanks, including that one?
Absolutely.
Okay, thanks.
In fact, I believe that you can leave all of the amount sections blank, as well as any of the code areas blank. I would not circle any of the codes at this time, in that you know, that could change. You might not use respite, or you might decide later to use respite. So you can actually not do that at this time and still submit all of your paperwork. As long as your signatures are there and the important names are there, that is the important thing. You need signatures, you need initials. DSPD can fill in the amounts and the codes later.
Okay, thank you. And one other question. Some of these forms we went through pretty quickly. If I want to go back and look at the examples as I'm proofing the forms that I was trying to go along with. Where can I find these examples that you've showed?
So I did post them on the chat. I don't know if you are able to see that and download the PDF of the
We
sample
lost you,
package.
Esperanza.
What was that, Julia?
Oh, you just kind of broke up, Esperanza, but it's in the chat. If you want to roll back up again, you can pull it up in the chat. And I think that we will have. Can we hear you? Are you there?
Yes. Can you hear me? Can people hear when I speak?
Yes.
Okay. So the sample packet is in the chat. We will be posting it to our website as well. We have a dedicated web page. So the same place where this recording is going to go, we're going to put it up on the Utah Parent Center's website. So hopefully you can download it from the chat right now so you can have that accessible to you right away. But if not, it will be on our webpage as well.
Okay,
And
thanks.
Christine just posted in the chat where are the direct link to that web page.
Excellent. Okay, we only have a couple of more minutes. Does anybody have any burning questions at this point? Okay.